Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at Astrho Live Partner Showcase. We're here with Beyond and Jack Repke from Beyond, previously Beyond Pricing. I'm still learning how to say that correctly. But at any rate, thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm going to turn things over to Jack for a live demo of their platform.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you everybody for being here. And, I guess first, just a little bit of background, on myself, who I am. So again, my name is Jack Repke. What you're seeing on the screen right now, this is actually a property that my wife and I own. We're down in Charleston, South Carolina. So we're just like you. We actually operate a short-term rental. It's out of the lower level of our home. That's how I came to find dynamic pricing. Down here in Charleston, it's a pretty dynamic market. We were doing flat pricing for the most part. We started adding in holidays. We started trying to do some seasonality, but we found that we were just selling our inventory like crazy. So I was looking for other solutions and came upon the tool. At the time, I was working for a different company, but I got into this. I learned it. I loved it so much that I decided to come work for the company. So with me, you're getting someone who actually uses a tool. This is my actual listing that I'm going to show you here today. And yeah, super excited to be here. So a little bit more about Beyond. If you've been looking into dynamic pricing tools, so Beyond was actually the first dynamic pricing tool that there was. So we started back in 2013. Our founder was working for an airline at the time. Obviously, airlines, hotels, they kind of pioneered the dynamic pricing world. And he was also running a property management company at the same time. So he saw a niche in the vacation rental industry. Beyond Pricing was then created back in 2013. Since then, we've really grown. So, now we're up to a little over 350,000 listings. We're in 7,500 countries across the world. I think last year we did a little over 4 billion in bookings, and we're close to 100 employees now. So the company has grown, the tool's gotten better, and I'm definitely excited to hop in and show you a few things today. So that's a little bit of a background on me. What I'll say is, as I'm going through this, I encourage you to submit your questions. I know if you haven't looked at dynamic pricing before, it can feel a little foreign. And so any questions you have, I'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. And if some aren't submitted, I have a few kind of teed up. But yeah, let's just kind of jump in and take a look at the platform. So I think the place that I like to start, and again, I know we have a crowd that maybe you've looked at dynamic pricing, maybe you haven't, but we'll just kind of try to generalize here. So what I mean by dynamic pricing, I like to compare it to how airlines price, right? You go on a Monday compared to a Friday to look for flights, though that price is going to change. That's demand that's pushing that price up or down. That's essentially what we're doing here with our tool, right? So with the dynamic pricing tool. So Beyond specifically has one of the richest data sets in the industry. We pull from multiple OTAs. So Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com. In some instances, we actually pull hotel data as well, just because they're smart. They don't wait for demand to raise prices. If there's an event, a year from now, they're just going to preemptively do that. So again, we do pull from the most OTAs out of the dynamic pricers out there. And so what you're seeing right now, this is an occupancy graph of Charleston, South Carolina. Okay, that's where our short-term rental is, as you can see right here. And basically, let's go pick a date. So we look back 2 years. So this is 2019, pre-pandemic, right? And you can see right here, so if we look at August 31st, 79.49%, what does that mean? What we do on your listings is we try to get the closest 150 to 200 listings. And we're looking at the total occupancy on those OTAs. So any listing that's on Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, we're pulling that data in. So what that means is that on August 31st, 2019, 79% of the properties were booked. That means we had 21% that actually went unbooked for that date. So that's the basics, right? Charleston is a heavy weekend market. You can see these spikes up or down. So for those of you that have more of a flat pricing strategy, I'm going to show you some things you should maybe be thinking about. Seasonality being one, day of week, events, obviously, if you can, but that is something the tool does pick up. So that's 2 years back. And then you can kind of see what happened here, right? The pandemic. So for those of you that are in traditional vacation rental markets, we had a bit of a shutdown right away in March and April. But then what you may have seen last year is that we had much higher occupancy rates. And we're seeing that pretty much consistent across the country for most drivable vacation markets. Again, urban markets acted a lot differently than your traditional vacation markets, but Charleston being one, we had much higher occupancy. So you can see this blue line here, pretty much all of last year, we were 10 to 20% higher. And then, this last spring, I mean, things really took off, right? And when we're comparing it to what happened with the pandemic, obviously we're much higher, 40% in this instance. But that's the thing with our tool, by using a dynamic pricing tool, I talk to property managers every day in multiple markets, and a lot of them, who were flat pricing or maybe doing, certain seasons or raising weekend prices, they were trying to catch up with demand, right? So we saw a wave of bookings come through. They were trying to raise their price, but they didn't know how high to go. If they were leaving money on the table. What ended up happening to a lot of folks is they tried to adjust. They raised prices maybe 5, 10, 15%, but then they were still selling out their inventory just because they didn't have a real gauge on what was going on in the market. So if you were using a dynamic pricing tool, you were looking at that occupancy, we're raising prices up or down accordingly. But we had folks that were, 10 to 20% higher on a nightly rate pretty much the entire year last year. So again, 2 years back, we look at forward-looking demand as well. So you can see right here, when we compare, this future occupancy compared to this year, I mean, already, the end of July is almost where we were last year, right? So right now, we are on pace for a historic year. I'm sure everybody feels it. My wife and I sure as heck do, with our property here. Vaccines are rolling out. People are planning trips, further out. We've seen lead booking times go from last year, the average was about, 10 to 14 days for a lead booking time, right? Where now we've moved to a couple months. So for those of you that, are selling out if you're July, August, and you're starting to sell your September inventory, that's maybe a sign you are leaving some money on the table. And a dynamic pricing tool would be something definitely to take a look at. So that's some market data. And what do we bake into our prices, right? I think that's a really good kind of segue into the next question here. So here's our calendar view. My wife and I, we do build gaps into our schedule when we're here just for sanity. However, what you're going to see is green nights, these are going to show the average nightly rate. These are book nights that we have. But let's go look at an open month. So August right now, that's kind of our next month to sell. You can see the lighter blue is going to mean lower demand, and the darker blue is higher demand, right? When you looked at that chart, you saw the big peaks and valleys. Charleston is a weekend market, right? So when we were flat pricing, what happened was, we had the same nightly rate for every single day. We sold our weekends first, right? Thursday to Sunday. All of a sudden, 2 months out, Thursday to Sunday was sold. We were left with our Monday to Wednesday that we were going in and trying to have book, right? So that was a big aha moment for us, realizing that, okay, these weekends are selling first. We should probably do some sort of weekend strategy. Until I looked at the data, I didn't understand how much of a weekend market it was here. So again, every market is different. Beyond pricing, we hand launch our markets. So that is something unique to us as a company. We have a revenue management team. They're looking at these markets specifically and making sure that we're taking nuances into consideration. Charleston, for instance, we're in the inland area, so that operates differently than the coastal area. We're taking that into account. So let's go grab a date. I just want to show everybody kind of what we look at here. So you've got the base price, which I'll explain in a moment, but then we're looking at seasonality, right? So what's your high season, your low season, and we're adjusting up or down based on that. We're looking at day of week. So obviously in Charleston, the high season is going to be priced higher than, a Saturday is going to be priced higher than a Monday. You've got your local events. So the Cupper River Bridge Run, for instance, is this event here. And then you have, incremental demand due to COVID. So obviously vaccines are rolling out. So that's kind of what's baked into here. That's the calendar view. Just for time, I'll show you a couple other things here. So the stats tab, this is pretty cool. You can have a lot of data at your fingertips, right? So for those of you that are, number nerds like myself, and you kind of want to look at, okay, what are the specific stats of my property? We tee that up for you. So you've got recent bookings. We look at occupancy, what block nights you have. If you go and actually enjoy your vacation rental, we're taking that into consideration. Some specific things are looking at these average stay lengths, right? So you can get a sense of this and kind of start to build out a minimum night strategy. What's your lead booking time, right? But this is something that's good information on your listing. And again, we're going back as far as 2 years. My wife and I started up towards the end of last year, so that's why we don't have as much data. But that's the stats tab. Nearby listings. This is really nice. You're going to be able to keep an eye on competition. What are other folks doing? This will actually link out right directly to their Airbnb profile, so you can take a look at it there. But again, you're going to be able to see what's going on with nearby listings. And then we have a lot of automation with the tool. Minimum night stays right here. We do an annual minimum night stay. We do gap filling, right? So what that means is when you get that, if you have a 3-night minimum stay and you get that 2-night gap, we're going to automatically recognize that, fill that for you. Last minute stays, right? One I like to show too is last minute discounts. So, what my wife and I do is within 21 days, if we haven't sold a night, we start to incrementally decrease our price. Same thing on the other side, right? Like our lead booking window right now is about 60 days. So if anybody's taking inventory off 4 months, or further in advance, we're actually adding a premium there. So those are kind of the basics, of the tool. I know we're running up on time. I want to leave some time for Q&A. The last thing, this insights tab is pretty cool. This is now, if you have multiple listings, we're going to take that stats tab, aggregate everything, and give it to you in this dashboard here. You can actually drill down, see all of your listings, how they're performing this year to last year. We can save these reports. And that in a nutshell is the dynamic pricing tool. So I want to make sure I'm leaving up enough time for a quick Q&A. So did any questions come up from that?
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to chime in from the audience in the chat or Q&A feature on any questions that you have. And that was amazing to see your actual property, Jack, sorry. Thank you so much for walking through that, because this has been really insightful and helpful for me. I assume a lot of this could be done even from a smartphone or a mobile device pretty conveniently. I mean, I sit there on my phone and I turn my sprinklers off and on. So that's kind of the technology we're all looking for now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we don't have a mobile app yet at this point. It's been something that we've discussed, but obviously through your web browser, you'll be able to access Beyond, you bet.
Perfect. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
What about pricing as far as the cost? Let's say I'm a single property owner. I want to take full advantage of Beyond dynamic tools. What's that look like for me, and how do I justify the value of that from my end?
Yeah, definitely. So we are a revenue share model. So we do charge 1% of base rent plus fees. Okay, the reason that we price this way is we are aligned with your revenue growth. So, I was actually a Price Labs user prior to coming over to Beyond. I chose them simply because of the lower cost. But, when I did come over to Beyond, I was able to realize, a little bit more of the customer support. Obviously, I came to work for the company, so now I'm seeing behind the scenes a bit, with that as well. But we are aligned to make sure that we're maximizing revenue. So yeah, that's the pricing. I would say if you have any questions on it, feel free to reach out to us so we can elaborate on that further too. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. Seems pretty simple. Is there any option? I'm going to go off radar here a little bit, but is there any option to bundle what Beyond offers with any other industry partners? Like, let's say I'm using some kind of software to manage my property or anything like that.
Definitely, great question. So we integrate with most of the major PMS systems out there. I'd say probably 95% of them. So yeah, again, most of them are going to have a direct API connection. If you have multiple properties and you're set up in, an OwnerRez or an Escapia, we're going to connect directly to that. You bet. Okay,
perfect. Mm-hmm. What about your base prices? What can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the point I wanted to make around that is how important this base price is, right? So this is essentially the, I like to think of it as like the float line, right? So when I was on the chart tab there, you can see how these prices go up and down, but this base price is really the anchor set to how that's going to go up and down. So one thing unique to Beyond is that you are going to get, guidance on where that base price should be. We look at your past, your historical booking data, your future reservations that you have, and we're going to recommend a base price for you based on, what's going to optimize your revenue the most. And then that's something with our customer support will assist with over time as well. But this base price, you can see my wife and I've, increased it 4 times in the last month, right? And that's because demand is spiking here in Charleston, and we're trying to keep our booking window consistent, as we're rolling into the summer season. So yeah, it's a great question, and that's kind of the point on the base price there.
Okay, yeah, that's great tool. Makes it super simple so that you don't have to do too much brain damage on, I don't want to go below a certain rate, so you're just going to always adjust for that automatically.
Yep.
Perfect.
Awesome.
So any other questions come from the audience, feel free to chime in, but I had a lot of my own, so we're getting through them. This is great. There's kind of been this industry thought process of, I have 100% occupancy and that's perfect, or I'm going to charge really high prices and only have like 60, 70% occupancy because I want to make sure I don't get a lot of wear and tear and I maximize revenue. Can you speak to that theory a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And, property managers that I talk to, I hear that all the time, right? They, for folks that were maybe 100% occupied in the last year, they may be thinking that they left money on the table. So they'll say, well, if I raise my prices and get to maybe 70 or 80%, that feels like it's kind of an optimal point, right? Leaving that 20% vacancy, and I should be able to get the most money for that. That makes sense if you have a flat pricing strategy, right? Because just naturally, if you raise your prices and you're weeding out 20% here and you're flat price, for certain types of times of year, lower demand times of year, your shoulder or your low season, you're not going to be booking nights because you're overpriced. But what we do with the dynamic pricing tool is knowing when to raise prices, but when to lower them too, right? So you're going to see there's certain times of year, we go look at Thanksgiving. This upcoming year, we have $135 base price. We're recommending prices in the $250 range, but you can see for that next weekend of November, we're at $96. So we're actually below our base price, right? So the tool is not just about raising prices. It's also knowing, when demand is dropping and where prices should be to capture more occupancy. So for those of you that maybe missed out on some of that because you raised your prices, that's something that we're considering with the tool as well.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that actually leads into one last question that I had with regard to seasonality, because not so much from the pricing perspective, but is there a way to utilize your system to know when I should be changing my photos to drive more winter bookings? Let's say it's the middle of summer, but I want to start thinking ahead. It seems like this market data, could really play into that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's no indicator that's going to, tell you to swap your photos out, but obviously from a seasonality standpoint, you bet, right? So with the market occupancy graph, you can start to see, obviously in the summer here in Charleston is our high season. As we get into September, that's more of a low season. And even if we go to like 2 years ago, this is maybe a better representation pre-COVID. But for us, our shoulder season is as we get into September. October through December is our low season here. And then traditionally, the summer and the spring is the high season, in Charleston. Every market's different. Obviously holidays are something to account for, but yeah, you'll start to understand those trends, just by looking at that occupancy data. You bet.
Yeah, absolutely. That way I know when to put my Christmas tree photos up in July.
Yep, definitely.
Perfect. Well, I don't think we have any other questions coming in. We're just about at time. So I just, again, wanted to say thank you for the live demo, Jack. This was fantastic information, super helpful, and really great to see your property specifically. This isn't just a demo, this is live. So really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful for everybody. And what I would say is, even if you're not looking at a dynamic pricing tool, starting to look into some of those day of week, seasonality, make sure you're raising prices, for events, starting to pay attention to that a little bit can really help you with pricing, even if you don't decide to go the dynamic route. But thanks again for having me today and letting me kind of speak to it.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending and appreciate your time.
Awesome.